Hello, and we're back. And I'm here with Andrew Simpson, Executive Director, and Rod White, Program Director of the Filmhouse, which has exciting news are opening again. Andrew and Rod, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
A pleasure. Thanks for having us.
All right, so Rod, you have been part of the Filmhouse for many, many years, and we're part of the core team who has really put that campaign to bring the Filmhouse back through many iterations. Can you catch us up to speed a little bit on what's been going on?
Well, we had an awful lot of things to sort out back in wherever that was. I've forgotten now. October 2022. Which we didn't really know what they were going to be at the time, and we all made a commitment to kind of, give it a year, and a year turned into two, and two turned into 2.5. And throughout that time, various challenges were thrown in our way in terms of, well, not thrown in our way, but, were hurdles that needed to be gotten over. In convincing the guy who bought the building that leasing it to Filmhouse was the thing he wanted to do with it, and then finding the money to fix what was a fairly kind of crumbling edifice, really, that really needed quite a lot of money to make it fit for the future. So that's the fundamental aspects of it. It's taken an awful lot longer than any of us thought it would, and there have been times where it looked like there was no way forward, but something emerged, constantly emerged throughout those 2 years, and we now find ourselves on the verge of getting it open again in a very much improved Filmhouse is what everybody's going to find. I do hope they like what they find. There's always a worry that that somebody might not like it, but we'll have to put up with that. But I'm pretty confident it's going to go down rather well.
Yeah, and speaking of improvements, I mean, we've seen in the news there's a fourth screen, and and some sort of like lots of necessary improvements, as you've mentioned. But can you give us a little bit of what the updates might be in terms of structure?
Yeah, sure. So the cinemas in Filmhouse were from a different era, I suppose it's okay to say, and space square foot per customer in the cinemas was not exactly all that it could be. So we dropped the capacity in the screens so that people have more room, and we've been able to put in bigger seats as a result of that as well. We have been able to historically there was a whole section of the building that was run by the Edinburgh Film Guild, but they are now I understand very happy using a variety of screens around the city, so they no longer needed the space in Filmhouse. So that's all been available to us, and is the area that we have converted into a fourth screen. It's smaller than the other screens, but the fact that there's now 4 as opposed to 3 makes an awful lot of difference in terms of scheduling and the sheer sort of variety of things we should be able to undertake.
Absolutely.
So other than that, it's there's a few tweaks here and there to make it more accessible. Particularly Cinema 2 is just, I don't know if you were ever in it before, but there was a set of stairs had to be negotiated. We've removed those, so that's all flat access into there. And for the most part, it's fairly cosmetic, but quite, a lot has been done to make it an improved environment.
It's great.
It is sort of cosmetic in the sort of the bar foyer type areas.
Yeah, no, I mean, Screen 2 was such a great size of cinema for kind of works that it's great that it's being updated. So essential, the whole space for the whole film community. Andrew, you come from Tyneside background, so similar art house kind of cinema that has this similar prestige, but also from a programming background as well. What made you want to come and join the Filmhouse team?
So yeah, great question. So I've actually got sort of my own long storied history with the Filmhouse in that I lived in Edinburgh in my late teens and early 20s as a student. I got my start in the film industry at the Edinburgh International Film Festival, which is obviously based at the Filmhouse at that time and for most of the last few decades. And I've spent an awful lot of time in the Filmhouse, and it's very much a place where I experienced my original cinematic education as well as my start in the world of actually working professionally in film exhibition. It's a place that's enormously important to me. I've known the Filmhouse team for many years. Part of the senior team at a cinema in at the Tyneside in Newcastle, as you say. So, very much someone who's been getting a broad sort of base of experience in kind of running an equivalent venue, should I say, and was just enormously inspired by the story of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years. I think what Rod and the rest of the group that have spearheaded the reopening of the venue have done, I think, is really extraordinary. I think there's a story to be told around all of this, which is that, I think oftentimes, when important historic cultural organizations like the Filmhouse go, they really do go. I think in the years since COVID, we've all become a lot more aware of that, and actually to be able to resurrect the venue and to bring it back and bring it back better, as Rod's already hinted at, I think is a pretty profound achievement and something that's really exciting. So, I was just really excited to be a part of that journey, I suppose, and was sort of looking for the next step in my career as well, from a personal perspective. To come back to Edinburgh and to be part of the team running the new Filmhouse is just, too good an opportunity to miss, I think.
Rod, I got the opportunity to hear you to have a conversation with Jim Hickey during the 40th anniversary of
Yes.
and also got to chat with him at the very beginning of the news of the Filmhouse closing. And one thing that really struck me from both those conversations is how important a hub space Filmhouse has always been to the larger community, just the Filmhouse community. I mean, I spent many time having lots of meetings there as a independent freelance person, but also where you meet people, where you feel comfortable. But I think it's also obviously the program as well. It's really special and unique in Edinburgh, and without it, without a space like that, the film community doesn't have that opportunity. But what do you think makes the Filmhouse particularly special? I'm going to ask this to Andrew as well, from a historical perspective, but also now looking forward.
I mean, I think fundamentally, I mean, when I first came to Edinburgh more years ago than I care to mention, it was it was kind of, hadn't been around for very long when I came here. And it was just very quickly, and my life became an absolutely essential place. And the place you went in order to, I mean, I would go several times every week to watch a film, but I would also use the bar, and there was that very real sense of, I mean, not everybody, obviously, but many people there being there for the same reason. It was always a very safe kind of place and a very unthreatening place. And I always liked the way that it was ran, even before I worked there, because of how you could be there without feeling challenged in any way by anyone. And to have that sort of, that one place to go where an expression that's often used is about your tribe. I mean, that's very much how it felt, and how we want it to feel. And in terms of the whole idea, and I don't know that that Filmhouse in the later years did this particularly well, but is to make what goes on in the cinemas and what goes on in the rest of the building very much a logical extensions of each other, rather than trying to admit what the organization was and who it's for, and double down on that in every area, rather than trying to appeal to a certain kind of person there and a certain kind of person there. So that sort of is the tagline for Filmhouse used to be, and maybe will be again, films worth talking about. And that was the whole idea of that was about going to see a film and then giving people the opportunity to sit somewhere and discuss it afterwards. Right? I don't know about you, but sometimes watching the talking about the films after you've seen them is actually more interesting than the films themselves, and kind of, you can often get 2 or 3 hits from every film you've gone to see just in the subsequent conversations, and to provide that sort of place that was, perfectly aligned to perform that function is definitely what we're trying to achieve this time around. It may not quite have been done as well as it might have in years gone by. I mean, fundamentally for me, it's just that place to go where people are there for pretty much the same reasons.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we actually got to do a few in collaboration with the Film Guild. We run a doc club monthly, and we're able to do some doc screenings and then have that space afterwards to talk in the bar. And I totally agree with you. I think it's such an important, especially with documentaries, to kind of have like an informal space to chat around films. And sometimes it takes you a couple of days to really digest something, but
yeah, it does. Yeah.
But and flexes often I hear people in the bathroom like afterwards sort of chatting about it. But I love the fact that we have that bar space and always have in the Filmhouse, which is such an important part of it. Such a great point. Andrew, what do you think in terms of your experience having worked there in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Filmhouse has always been, I think, a very special space for exactly the reasons that Rod described. I think there's a couple of things to pick up on there. For me, one is around that kind of question of values for an organisation such as ourselves, to provide a space for the communities of Edinburgh to experience the full sort of diversity of cinema, but also to meet, to socialise, to talk about the art that they've experienced, or just come and have a drink or a bite to eat with friends, or a work meeting, as you were talking about. And that's very much part of the social and community mission of an organisation like Filmhouse, and particularly of Filmhouse, I would say. And then maybe there's I think there's something else to it as well, which is around that kind of idea of being a safe place to come. I'll be honest, don't get me wrong, I love going to watch films with friends and having a drink and talking about them afterwards. One of my favorite things to do in the world is to go to the cinema by myself, kind of on a weekday. And I'll never have another weekday off for months yet, cinema to open. But for me to be able to do that, and I'm very fortunate, with my background, that I'm someone who can generally go to venues and sort of cultural events and things by myself and not feel secure. That's not necessarily the case for everyone. Filmhouse in particular, independent cinemas and cultural spaces in general, being places that can provide that safe, inspiring kind of experience for people, I think is a really important thing, and something we're really committed to as an organisation.
That's great. And I think one thing that really came across from hearing people at the very beginning, having lost the Filmhouse, is how much it means and how much people really felt ownership of the space. And so that's really, really exciting. And I also love to go by myself, and I feel I tend to cry a lot more, like get more emotional.
It's the best.
It's a unique experience.
I would say, obviously in my past, I've spent a lot of time watching, distributors would send us films so that we could watch them, prior to booking them. So watching films in our cinemas on my own is quite a common thing. And I don't know if there's a nicer thing than sitting in Filmhouse Cinema One on your own, watching a great film. I mean, it's hard to beat. It really is.
So I'm very keen to hear about it. It's from what I'm reading, sort of a collaborative approach to running the Filmhouse coming up, and what your vision is in terms of what we'll see in terms of future Filmhouse. What for us to sort of expect in terms of what we'll see from Filmhouse in the coming years.
Yeah, no, I'll go first. Firstly, to sort of clarify, Rod and I are co-directors of the organisation, but Rod is director of programming. So the creative dimension and the films that are on screen and the Q&As and events and seasons, etc., that's very much Rod's domain and his team. I would say what I bring to the table is, and I do come from a creative and programming background sort of originally, but have, sort of stepped over into other areas of sort of organizational leadership sort of over the years, is someone who is fully committed to delivering the best that a cultural cinema can offer, and actually kind of, stepping in a position where I'm essentially kind of steering everything else, but all very much sort of driven towards Filmhouse doing and being able to do what it is here to do, which is to basically deliver one of the best cultural cinema programs in Britain, and perhaps even more broadly than that. And then otherwise I'll hand over to Rod.
Doesn't mean that if Andrew has some good ideas for the programming aspects of it, I promise him I'll give them proper
Rod, I haven't got any, as you well know,
consideration. It's actually been the fact that Andrew's like a generation behind me, if you like, but that we both sort of in terms of what we did for a living, sort of grew up in very similar environments. So to have two of us feels like full of opportunity, because there's none of, in the very short time we've been working together, neither of us have to ever explain anything to the other, because we actually understand it. So I'm quite excited about that there's not going to be any, from a programming perspective, that I don't anticipate there being the kind of, but certainly fighting for my corner won't be quite the challenge that perhaps it once was. And the fact that, there's two of us absolutely tuned to the, what we want the cinema to be from that perspective, from the sort of programming perspective. So yes, it's going to feel far more kind of unified in that way.
Mhm.
And we're very much, I guess it was a real reminder when the thing closed, and then what everybody was saying about it. And if we knew it was, a sort of how the community, as it were, felt about it, but it really hit home to us, like, just, this was more than we thought was going to come out of this. So we've, been fired up and enthused by that. And, Filmhouse was a kind of, had a lot of third-party programming entities, doing their festivals there and stuff. And we're going to try and do even more of that if we can. The challenge is always, it's quite a staff-hungry thing to do. So that's the challenge. But, as much as we're able to do, we will do. A whole number of the festivals that worked with Filmhouse before are coming back. Many of them have their schedules worked out for, their festivals in October and November. Yeah, full speed ahead with all of that, and they're all welcome, as are new people with good ideas.
And I was that leads me into the next question, but definitely, I guess we were talking about cinema as a third space, and Filmhouse being that third space of safety and comfort and, belonging, but also that this is a cultural institution that has wider impact in terms of its educational sort of opportunities and things like that. And so I guess maybe back to Andrew on if there's still that sort of vision in terms of how and the reach that Filmhouse will take, that's very different than a commercial cinema.
Yeah, so I think a few things. I mean, on the specifics of the educational outreach work, that is something that sits within Rod's team, and there's a team member that we've got in place already who's kind of working on that element of the program. But maybe I'll let him talk to that, and I'll speak to sort of the broader point around that question, which is, yeah, I think we touched on it maybe a little bit in terms of that sort of that sense of inclusivity and safety and values in previous questions. So I'd refer back to those. It's really vitally important that, Filmhouse is an accessible space and is able to sort of engage communities in a way that is more involved, I think, than perhaps other purely sort of commercial organizations are able to deliver. And obviously we're a charity with a social mission, and that's reflected in the films we show, the prices we charge, the schemes we run, that commitment to accessibility, the policies that we've got around creating a safe and welcoming and a happy environment for both audiences and for our staff, the wages we pay. so it really kind of flows through everything we do, I think. And that's really important. And then maybe if there's anything that Rob wants to say about the education programs, then maybe.
I've been keen to previously at Filmhouse, the educational element sat to the side of programming and was a sort of direct report to the CEO type situation. I've been keen to bring the we don't call it education though, it's learning and engagement into the programming department, and then just make it so that the learning and engagement will be, which was by and large sort of with schools or, private, as it were, much more kind of part of the public program, to try and kind of, give it more visibility in that way. So the individual charged with that only started on Monday. So we're just, planning now how that's all going to come out. And, but it's, looking like the right way to go just at this moment in time.
Right. And as you mentioned, Rod, the Filmhouse is the home of many festivals and was obviously the big festival that we all knew of and around the world. But smaller festivals, I've been working with Edinburgh Short Film Festival for years, so I know it was an important home to them, and Take One Action and all of them. So
Yep.
yeah, you mentioned briefly that those festivals are already planning to come back. But are we to expect the film festival to come back as well?
That would need to be an announcement that they make.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that a little bit and say that, we're very proud of Filmhouse's long and very sort of storied history with the Edinburgh International Film Festival. I think there's a really exciting story to be told around how all of the organisations that were once under the umbrella of CMI that all disappeared in 2022, how they've all managed to come back to, existence and fruition and to thrive in the future. The festival being one, Filmhouse being another, which is sort of very soon to be open. It's great that the festival will be returning to Edinburgh again in August, and we hope that association can continue, and that's sort of where we are. I'll be confident enough to say that, Rod, at this point, which is my prerogative to say. So
when can I buy a ticket to the Filmhouse again, and when can I come back? Because I know everyone's going to be, from our audience, is going to be really interested in knowing those exciting news. And what's the first film that is going to be the first next?
I don't know the answer to that last one yet. We've kind of got to the position where, we've had a date in our mind for quite some time, but obviously it would be foolish to say it until we could actually guarantee. And there's been a few things got in the way of those dates, so we're just at the point now of re-establishing a slightly later date than we had in mind. I think all we can really say at this point is, I think we can safely say it will be before July.
Great. I mean, very, very exciting for us.
But we will be, I would say, within the next 2 weeks, we will have announced when it's going to open.
Okay,
So it's
great.
not long to wait now.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us about it. We're really all looking forward to the Filmhouse coming back, and and really appreciate your time on this show.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.